Hi, I am John Kleitz, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation. And just to make sure that you are in the right place so we don't waste your time, what I'm going to be covering in this video and a subsequent video is the topic of teaching English online. Could it be right for you? Now, before I dive into the content, and I'm going to be covering a lot of stuff in this video and the next, I'd like you to do me a small favor, and that is to tell me how you found this video. Very likely it was through a Facebook ad, but it might have been through a Google search or a search here in YouTube, might have been a referral from a friend who is familiar with me or my course, or you might have read my ebook. In any case, it would help me a lot if you would just enter below in the comments how you found this video. Now, you might be asking yourself at this point, who am I and why would you be listening to me? Well, you can hop over to any of these websites and you'll probably find a bio for me, at least on most of them, because I have written for all of these publications about the subject of teaching English online, teaching English in Brazil, teaching English abroad. And so you can find a bio about me. But in the interest of time today, let's just kind of focus on me as a teacher. I mean, through my business career, I worked in manufacturing, banking, consulting, and software. But I began teaching English as really a second career in 2008. And at that time, I was teaching students face-to-face in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This picture of me here with Camila, one of my earlier students. But by early 2012, I was already migrating to teaching English online. It was kind of a new thing back then, but I found that I really enjoyed it. I think that in many ways it's superior actually to teaching face-to-face. And I'm going to talk later in this presentation about why I believe that. Now, I do want to throw up an alert right here, right now, just to make sure that we're on the same wavelength. I, again, don't want to waste anyone's time. This presentation could have easily been called Teaching English Online as an independent teacher. Could it be right for you? I do not operate a school, and therefore I don't hire teachers. I'm not going to be offering you a job. So if that was your expectation when you clicked onto this video, you might as well hop off right now, because that's not what this is about. You can go over to Facebook, and there are lots of pages over there from online schools and agents look for teachers for online schools. And I'm sure that you can probably find yourself a job working for an online school making half the money that you would as an independent. If that's what you want to do, fine. But that's not what we're going to cover in this presentation. Capiche? Now, on the other hand, if the idea of being your own boss appeals to you, then you are in the right place. And in case you don't recognize that gentleman in the photo right there, this is what he used to look like back in the day. That's Bruce Springsteen, AKA the boss. All right, so we've got a lot to cover today. Let's move on ahead. So what are we exactly going to talk about? Well, several things. First, we're going to address what exactly is teaching English online like? And that's actually a fair question because it does take many forms. So I'll give you some examples and talk about what my teaching looks like. I mentioned in passing that I prefer teaching online to teaching in person, so we'll talk about why that is. We'll talk about how much you can make. I imagine that the primary reason that you are interested in teaching is to make some money on the side, so we'll address that. It varies depending on what your niche is. We'll talk about that also. We'll address the techie stuff. And in there, I include how you're going to get paid. You know, if you're here and your student's over there, how do you manage getting paid? I just want to say right here that the tech stuff is not nearly as difficult as you might imagine it to be. And it's just so much easier than it used to be and getting better all the time. We'll talk about what the qualifications, certifications are that are needed to teach, but not as much as you might imagine. Really, honestly, if you're a native English speaker, you are halfway home, truly. We'll talk about defining your niche. You may say niche, but this is just your specialization. And I'm going to devote a good bit of time to this topic because it is just so very key to your success. So I want you to try and define your niche early on. And again, we're going to go into this topic in some detail. I want to talk about the rewards of teaching English, and here I'm talking about the non-monetary rewards. These days I do other things as well. I market, besides teaching, I market this course, I do some writing, publications, and yet I still am teaching English online after 15 years. And why is that? We'll talk about that. And finally, squeezed in here at the bottom, I decided to add in this topic about where things can go awry. Now, I firmly believe that if you're a native English speaker and you are motivated, that you can be successful teaching English online. But that said, everyone who goes into this doesn't succeed. And I've identified just a handful of reasons about why I think that is where things typically go off the rails. So we'll talk about that a bit as well. Not to be negative, but I feel like being forewarned is forearmed, right? All right. So again, full disclosure, I mentioned already that I offer a course. Of course, you're not obligated to purchase it at all. But after going through these first two videos talking about what teaching English online is like, if you feel like, yeah, this is something I could do, I would enjoy doing this, I believe, then I encourage you to watch the third video. And what we'll do in that third video is we'll take a good peek inside. We'll hop over to Teachable, which is where the course is hosted, and take a look at the curriculum in some detail. So you can see what all is in there. It's very soup to nuts, A to Z, A to Z. But we'll cross that when we get to it. Let's watch the first two videos, and then you can decide whether this might be right for you. And if you think it might be, then I encourage you to watch the third, but that'll be your choice, right? Okay, so without further ado, let's dive into the content. Let's rock and roll with Bruce, the boss. Okay, so first topic up, what is teaching online like? Let's go back here to this picture of me with Camila there. If you've ever done any kind of face-to-face tutoring, it doesn't have to be of English, of any subject, but if at some point in your life you have been seated at a table next to or across from someone teaching them how to do something, that is going to translate very well to teaching English online, which is very much like one-on-one tutoring, except of course it's online. But if you had this image in your head of you standing in front of a classroom, there's a whole classroom there. It's not like that at all. Again, it's much more like one-on-one tutoring, and hopefully that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Now, here's a question for you. As far as content goes, what does teaching English online look like? What do you think most lessons center around? A hint there would be, what do students want? What do students want to learn from you? All right. Well, if you said grammar, nope, it's not grammar. Grammar is, I would say, probably fifth or sixth down the list of what students really want. Now, some students really do want grammar. Some students enjoy grammar, as odd as that may seem, but no, that's not it. The two things that students really want most are to improve their fluency and to reduce their accent. Now, that should make you feel a little bit more comfortable. So just imagine, forgetting for a moment the whole English teacher bit, just imagine that you were at a party Saturday night and you met someone who spoke English as a second or even a third language, and she asked you to correct her, to help her to improve her English. Now, you could help her with that, right? Sure, you could. Of course, you could. Even not being an English teacher, as a native English speaker, you could help someone to, by correcting her pronunciation or restating the sentence for her. You can do that. And that is so much of what you're going to do as an English teacher. Now, what's the format of most lessons like? Well, I like to say it's kind of like a hamburger, all right? In every, or cheeseburger as we have here, in every class, I like to begin with some conversation and end with some conversation because that's how students gain fluency, right? By actually talking and having conversation. And so you can think of the conversation as the bun, the opening and the closing. Now you can think of the meat patties, soy patties if you prefer, as the major materials in the class. I often have two materials in a class. My classes are typically about an hour long. And so I might have a couple of materials of 20, 25 minutes. And so those would be the patties. And then what's all the other stuff, the cheese and the tomato and the condiments and everything? Well, those are the questions that you get and the little digressions that you have in every class, right? But this is kind of the general pattern. So we'll have conversation and we'll have probably two main topics, materials during the hour, and then some closing conversation. One of the main things that I like to do, one of the main exercises that I like to do in classes is to have students read articles for me. News articles could be, but it could really be on any topic. As a matter of fact, before I actually accept a prospect as a student, I like to talk to him or her for about a half an hour in something called an assessment chat, which is an integral part of my methodology, and I'll talk more about that later. But during the assessment chat, one of the things I like to get to is what interests the student. So even if she is studying English to use in her business, I like to ask her, what do you like to do outside of business? What interests you? Because this helps guide me in selecting articles that we'll read together in class. And typical topics would be sports, food and healthy eating, travel is a big one. A lot of times students want to improve their English for travel. Could be politics, surprisingly, current events, lots of different things. But try to find out what is interesting for the student, because really any article of the correct level of difficulty can be a good learning material. So this is one of the things that I do quite frequently. Reading articles is probably about half of my classes that I give would involve the student reading articles aloud for me. Now, why do I love teaching using articles? Well, because it exercises the student's abilities in so many different ways. First, the student improves his or her pronunciation. I try not to interrupt too much while the student's reading an article, but I do like to correct pronunciation at the moment rather than have the student get in the habit of saying the word wrong and fixing it wrong. I try to correct that at the moment. The student, of course, is going to learn new vocabulary, reading the article, and also learns grammar, kind of like by osmosis. So even if this isn't a grammar lesson, the student is going to look at a sentence and go, oh, you can phrase it that way. Ah, that's interesting. Okay. And then after the student completes the article, the student and I will discuss the article, which gives the student a chance to improve her fluency. I can ask leading questions like, did you think about the article? Do you agree? Disagree? Why? Why not? Okay. And again, almost any subject can serve. And then from your standpoint, as the teacher, one of the nice things about using articles is that they are free. You can find an article on just about anything out on the internet. But teaching English can take many forms. Things that I've also done, I've reviewed emails for students for their work. I have a student now, relatively new student, Alini. I guess we've been working together about 6 months. And most of the time she will bring emails for me, short emails. She has to read and respond to emails from her coworkers in the US. And so we'll do that. I've coached students for interviews. These might be for jobs or internships, observerships, etc. I've helped students do a more formal, complete job search, starting with their resumes, cover letters, mock interviews, post-interview follow-up, and so on. Help them apply for various programs, again, like observership, study abroad programs. I've helped them with TOEFL preparation. Now, TOEFL, don't confuse this with TEFL. TEFL is like a certification that you might get. You don't need it to teach English, but the TOEFL is Test of English as a Foreign Language. And this is a test, it's really a series of tests that a high school senior, let's say in France or Mexico, might take if she wanted to study abroad in the US or Canada for a year in university. So the university, before they're going to give a foreign student a seat, wants to have that student demonstrate his or her proficiency, right? And that's what the TOEFL is about. We'll talk more about this later. This is a really good niche, can be a very lucrative niche if it interests you. I've also helped students prepare articles for submission. And this is something that is a specialty, but if you're comfortable with the written word, you feel like you're pretty good in writing and grammar, punctuation, and so on. This is something not all teachers can do, and it's something you might be interested in doing. And with some of my more advanced students, I've read short stories and even literature. It's something that my students typically have not done, and they find it very interesting. Now, talking about what teaching English looks like, my way of doing things is that I select students who tend to stay with me for a long time, and they have regular slots in my calendar. Would be in contrast to, say, a school like Cambly, where you just kind of log in and hope that a student happens to log in at the same time and selects you. Okay, I would never do that kind of teaching, but what I have is a regular schedule, and my students come in at a regular time, and I know who I'm going to be teaching so that I can prepare for that. And because my students do tend to stay with me for a long time, and I mean some of them for years, then I get to see them progress. So this is what teaching looks like for me and what it could look like for you. One of the nice things also about having a regular schedule is that you know how much you're going to make pretty much each month, and that's really good. Okay, now this won't apply to everybody, but some of you may be interested in becoming digital nomads. And if so, then teaching English online is a way that you can fund your travels. So that's something to consider as well. All right, so that wraps up that topic. So what's up next? Well, let's talk about why I enjoy teaching English. I've alluded to a couple of things there, but here's a quote from my friend Damon. I've worked for a living and I've taught English. Teaching English is better. Well, obviously that's a bit of an exaggeration because teaching English is a job, right? You have to prepare lessons, you got to show up. But compared to some of the jobs I've had, like my first job when I was 15 was building fences, metal fences, wooden fences, cutting pipe, mixing concrete, digging post holes. No fun at all. No fun for minimum wage. So what's so good about teaching English? Well, the pay is decent. You're not going to get rich, but the pay is decent and commensurate with the work, okay? Particularly if, as many of you are, I'm sure, you're in retirement or nearing retirement. If you've looked around out there for some part-time work to augment your retirement income, you probably have discovered that there are a lot of jobs out there, and most of them, in a word, suck, right? So if you want to be a greeter at Walmart or sweep up like our guy here in the picture, or restock shelves or work a till at a fast food place. Hey, those jobs are out there. But man, they're just not enjoyable jobs, right? For one thing, there's no respect for you, right? For your experience. On the other hand, if you're teaching English, one of the things that your student probably is really looking for from you, besides just the fact that you're a native English speaker, is your experience. So if you're a little bit older, as I am, I'm coming into retirement myself, um, you'll find that your age, far from being a detriment, is an asset. And I get so often at the end of class, my students will say, thank you, teacher. They're very appreciative of my years in business and my experience that I am sharing with them. And I got to tell you, I never get tired of hearing thank you, teacher, at the end of a class. Wouldn't you like that? A little sincere appreciation? One of the other nice things is that you can set your own hours when you teach English online, assuming you're independent. If you work for a school, they're probably going to want you to work certain specific hours. But if you're an early bird like me, there's work out there. Or if you're a night owl, you can also find work out there. I mean, really, at any time of day or night, search online. You pause the video here and do a search. How many people do you think are studying English right now on the planet? Okay, why don't you, this would be a good exercise. Why don't you pause the video, open another window, go over there and search how many people are studying English worldwide. You're going to come up with a number somewhere between 1 billion and 1.5 billion, and that's with a B, right? So I promise you, whatever hours you want to work, you can find somebody somewhere in the world who would like to study those hours with you, all right? Teaching English, whether face-to-face or online, is often very interesting too. I mean, some things that I've done with students are explored various countries. Remember, I said that one of the things that students like to read about in articles is travel. And so I've explored many, many countries with students. I've learned a lot about history. I used to find history boring, but I've had many students who like history, and I've learned a lot about it. I've also learned a good bit about economics. I've read novels with some students. We discuss Netflix shows. That's often kind of a fun thing to do for at the end of a class, is to say, hey, what are you watching on Netflix? Or, what are you going to be doing this weekend? Oh, probably it's going to be rain, so I'll probably just curl up and watch some Netflix. And I go, oh, what are you watching? And oh, that sounds good. I haven't seen that show. And we might kind of follow a show together and talk about it in the next class. And something that I like to do from time to time with students as a special treat is to listen to and dissect songs. So we'll have a music class, and we can usually go to about 4 songs, typically in an hour class, where we'll listen to the song, and then I'll ask the student questions about, well, what did you get from it? Typically not much. And then we'll go back through and review the lyrics in detail. And the students just really love this. I mean, almost everybody likes music. It's a fun class. They can learn that, that way. And it's just a real treat. So I'll often do that if we've had a couple of tough lessons, some tough material, and then we'll have fun. So this is something else that's really nice about teaching English. Those points really, I think, apply to teaching English, whether it's face-to-face or online. Online, I think, is even better. And why do I say that? Well, you get to work from home. Now, let's unpack that, because there's a lot of stuff in there. What are some of the advantages of working from home? Well, first, of course, no gas, oil expenses, no wear and tear on your car, right? No going out in crappy weather. Now, I know that some of you must live in areas where winters are severe, and getting into the car and getting out there on the road and the snow and the slush and the black ice, that's no fun, right? Or perhaps like I lived in South Florida for many years, and through the summer months and into the fall, we get torrential rain in the afternoon, typically between 3 and 5, and nobody goes out on the road if they can avoid it during those hours. Another nice thing about working from home, no time wasted in commute. You can also stack classes, and by that I mean you can have like 3 or 4 classes right in a row. Think back to my calendar that we saw a few slides back, right? You may have noticed that I have classes back to back to back. That's something you can do when you teach online that really you can't do when you're teaching face to face, unless you happen to have a fixed location where the students come to you, but that's pretty rare. Typically what happens is you travel to the student's home or place of business or a cafe or something like that to meet them. And you lose time. You lose time traveling from one location to the next. Other things, you don't have to deal with idiot drivers when you're at home. There's no chance of a fender bender, and when you're done working, you just close the computer and go in and plop down and watch TV or whatever you want to do. So it's really nice. Oh, and one other thing, you may remember this thing came around a few years ago called COVID-19, right? If you were teaching face-to-face or really doing any kind of face-to-face work, COVID really threw a wrench into things, right? Whereas for me, I didn't miss a beat. I just kept teaching. And I think back to the days when I did teach face-to-face and I was hopping all around Rio. It seemed like, every day I was on a bus or in the metro or in a combi van, and I got colds all the time because I was always on public transit. So 4 or 5 times a year, I'd get these really severe colds. None of that anymore. And these days, if a student wants to have a class and she has a bit of a cold, but she's still up to having class, well, we can go ahead and do it. And I don't worry about catching anything. And we've been talking about a lot of reasons why you as a teacher would enjoy teaching English online, but students like it too. Now, back in 2012, when I first started teaching online, this was kind of a new idea, at least in Brazil, and I had to kind of persuade students to try it, maybe give them a discount to try it, but not anymore. I think particularly post-pandemic, people are much more familiar with the idea of studying online. There are a lot of reasons why it's good for the student as well. So let's kind of contrast. Let's say that the old traditional way, the student would probably finish work and then after work, like run off directly to a school to sit in a classroom with many other students and go through a lesson which might or might not really apply to her. She might be in there with people who are more advanced than her or less advanced than her. And there's a very good chance that the teacher is not a native English speaker, because that's very common around the world. And so it's just, not as satisfying. The material certainly was not prepared for her. Now, contrast that with the kind of teaching that I do that you could be doing. So the student comes home and maybe has a chance to take a quick shower, grab a quick bite to eat before settling down in her comfy chair with her computer to have a class with her very own native English speaking teacher who has prepared a lesson just for her, right? So students really like this too, right? And I want to drive this point home because you don't need to in any way apologize for classes being online or sell them as, kind of an alternative, a lesser alternative to teaching face-to-face. No. These days, people recognize the advantages of studying online, and it's not like a poor alternative. It's something that's good for you and good for the student as well. All right, so that takes us into our next topic, which is what you've really been waiting for, right? So how much can you make teaching English online? Well, first, I want to say, we've all been on those presentations where they show you some ridiculous, extravagant amount, and it only took her 3 weeks to make this money, right? And then immediately thereafter, there's a disclaimer saying these results are not typical, right? Isn't that frustrating? I find that really frustrating and frankly a little bit insulting. So I'm not going to do that to you today. You know, my grandmother Kleitz, this is not actually my grandmother Kleitz, but she did used to do that thing with her finger. And she used to say, no hokum, right? So my promise to you today in this section and throughout the entire presentation is no hokum. I'm just going to lay it out there straight. Okay, so I want to ask you, how much extra do you want to make a month? And if it falls somewhere in this range, your expectations are quite reasonable. I do want to be honest, though. I mean, if you live in a developed country, US, Canada, UK, Australia, and you are hoping to replace a full-time regular income, it's going to be a challenge doing that, teaching English online. But on the other hand, if what you're looking for is to augment your retirement income or just to have a nice side gig to do in the evenings, I can't think of anything better. Now, here's an interesting thing. I frequently do one-on-one chats with people who are sincerely interested in my course, but they want to talk to me a little bit first. And so before I let them schedule a consult on my calendar, I have them fill out a short survey. One of the things that I ask is, how much extra would you like to make a month? And what do you suppose that the most common response is? Okay. It's actually none of these, right? It's actually none of these. It's, for some reason, $800. It's not 500. It's not 1,000. It's 800. And I really don't know why. I find that rather curious. But then again, you know, for a lot of folks, my mother included, 800 is a house payment. That more than covers my mom's house payment every month, and it certainly would be a very nice car payment for a very nice car for many folks. So I think that for a lot of folks, $800 would make quite a bit of difference in their lives, right? Now, also, let's think about what is the average Social Security benefit. And I don't know for our friends north of the border what the Canada pension plan payments would be, but very likely they're somewhat similar to this. Now, depending on many factors, your age at retirement, how much you made, how long you contributed to Social Security, your payout, monthly payout, is going to vary, of course. But for a lot of folks, it's somewhere in this range. Let's say 1,500, 1,800, maybe 2,000. So now, if you're looking at another 800 or 1,000 or 1,500 a month via teaching, that's quite a boost, right, to your retirement income. Now, I hope you have some other things too, like your house is paid for, you have rental property or what have you. But again, I think that for most folks, another $1,000 a month would make quite a difference in life. And that's the figure that I'm going to use here. Now, going back to Social Security, let's suppose that you called up Social Security and you said, you know, this just isn't going to do it for me. I'd like more, please. You know, please, sir, I want some more. What do you think Social Security is going to tell you? Something along the lines probably of go pound sand, right? It might be a little bit more polite than that. It might be simply dismay, but you're quite unlikely to receive more money, right? And the unfortunate thing, but the reality today, is that you really can't depend on the government or anybody else to take care of you. You really have to depend on yourself. Now, some of you may recognize this picture and what's going on here, but if you ever saw the movie Witness with Harrison Ford, this is an Amish barn raising where the community used to come together and help a young couple that had recently got married to put up their barn, right? And The truth of the matter today, though, is that your community, your neighborhood, your friends, even your family are unlikely to help out too much, right? When it comes to finances. And so you really have to depend on yourself. But the good news is that you really can take control of your finances in a major way by starting your own home-based business. And teaching English online is really one of the best home businesses I think that you can get into. Let's compare working from home, having your home-based business, to a traditional brick and mortar business. And I like to think about a pizzeria. So if you and your spouse wanted to launch a pizzeria, what would you need to do? Well, first you've got to find a location. It needs to be a good location, right? That's very important for a restaurant, and you'll then need to get a lease, perhaps a long-term lease on that. Most businesses are long-term leases. You're going to need kitchen equipment, and that's expensive, so you'll probably lease rather than that. You'll also have to get the tables and decor for out front. Unless you or your spouse, one of you, are really good at cooking, you'll need to hire a chef, or at least somebody to help you develop the menu. You'll have to hire and train wait staff. You'll have to do marketing. Oh, licenses. Can't forget licenses, right? So you've got to do all of this stuff before you can even open the doors. And then you have to hope that you get enough business to keep you afloat for the first year, because half of restaurants and most small businesses will collapse in the first year, typically from lack of capital, right? Now, by contrast, teaching English online from your home is inexpensive, easy to begin, and you can begin earning really quickly. It's just superior in so many ways. So let's go back to that $1,000, right? And let's do the math, okay? So let's say that your target, at least initially, is going to be an extra $1,000 a month, okay? Well, let's say, how much can you make per hour? I think you can probably make around $18 an hour if you're a native speaker. You want to have a good niche. If you're just going to teach conversation classes, you won't get this much. But if you have a decent niche, and we'll talk about that in detail shortly, then let's say 18 hours an hour to start. Well, you divide 1,000 a month by 18 per hour, and that comes out to 56 hours a month. And you divide 56 hours a month by 4 weeks. It's actually about 4.3 in an average month, but let's keep it simple. 4 weeks, then that comes down to 14 hours a week. So do you think that you could work 14 hours a week in exchange for an extra $1,000 a month, and what it would do for you, the security that it would give you? I think that you could. No, it's not a pot of gold, but it's steady, dependable income, not pie in the sky by any means, and it will grow. As you get your first students and you teach them well, and I'll show you how to do that, and they're happy, they're going to be referring people to you. That just happened to me a couple days ago. It's Sunday now as I record this, and I guess it was Friday. I got a message from Rodolfo, who's a former student of mine, and he said, "Oh, can my friend contact you? He's going to be traveling. He wants to study English." And sorry, I'm digressing here, but anyway, the guy contacted me last night. So I just want to say that you can expect that once you get started, it's going to grow. It's going to continue to grow. And let's play that game that I always do on these presentations and think, what would an extra $1,000 a month really mean to you? Right? And I think this is worth doing because it's easy to think about doing something and then go, nah, well, whatever. You need to have that carrot out in front of you, that vision, that goal in front of you if you're going to launch into something new and you want to keep going on it. So what would an extra $1,000 a month mean for you? Well, no. A new yacht? No, probably not. but certainly not one like this one here in the picture. But, what would it mean to you? Well, it might be as simple as, hey, you can set the thermostat wherever you want it, and you don't have to worry about the next electricity bill, right? You can be comfortable. You don't have to worry about putting on another sweater or sitting there with the fan and sweating to death, right? It could mean, something as simple as having a date night every, Saturday, going out and not just ordering a pizza in, but going out for a real dinner, right? And having a glass of wine at your favorite restaurant and being able to leave a nice tip for the waiter, waitress, and, just without worrying about it. Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe you would like to write a check for your church in a way that you haven't been able to really in a while. Or perhaps you have a grandchild going off to university and you really don't want her to have to worry about working while she's going to school. You want her to be able to focus on her studies, and wouldn't it be nice to be able to help her out? So beyond yourself and your own situation, maybe you'd like to help others, and that's very noble. And we set $1,000 as our first goal, our target. I think it's very doable. You can get there pretty quickly, but you don't have to stop there, right? You can make more money. How? Well, obviously, you can work more hours. And I think at my peak, I was teaching about 28 hours a week, plus doing lesson plans. Now, that's hard to sustain. It is. And at that time, I was traveling from student to student too. So I was really humping it. But I'd say, 22, 23, 24 hours a week plus lesson prep is maintainable. All right. You can always increase your hourly rate, and actually you should be, once a year, you should be giving yourself a cost of living increase, and you've got additional experience now too, right? Probably better materials, and you're better at what you do. So you should be upping your rate probably for all of your students. And that should be understood when you sign up a new student. But certainly, if you don't want to raise the rate for your existing students, as you bring on new students, you can charge them more. Here's a tip that you may not have thought about, and that is to look for students in the larger cities, because around the world, the larger salaries, the better jobs and the larger salaries are typically found in the larger cities. Plus, if you're placing ads, if you place them, in larger cities, then you'll get your ad out in front of more people too, right? But again, they can afford to pay more as well. You could think about teaching small groups. I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into niches. But I would say starting out, teach individuals, but later on, you might want to do small groups. You also don't have to charge by the class, by the hour. You can offer a package. And again, we'll talk more about that in niches, but I think I may have already mentioned the TOEFL exam, helping students with the TOEFL exam. So you've got a foreign student who wants to study in an English-speaking university, English-speaking country. They'll have to pass a TOEFL or IELTS exam. IELTS is the European version, TOEFL is the North American version. And you could set that up as a package and charge for the entire package instead of by the hour. You could consider moving into a better niche. So as you get more experience, something may present itself. Like I started out and still do mostly teaching business and finance English, but for quite a while, I had a number of doctors, some surgeons that I taught. That just sort of landed in my lap. And, I charged them the same, but I might have been able to charge them more. You can also consider doing adjunct work. And by that, I mean stuff that's kind of related to teaching English, but isn't strictly speaking teaching English. So it could be, for example, proofreading papers. It could be doing translation work. And by the way, you don't have to be 100% bilingual to be able to do that. I speak good Portuguese these days, but not like a native. I wouldn't translate from English into Portuguese, but I have done a lot of work translating from Portuguese into English because it's always easier to translate into your first language, right? So this is something that you might look at either, if not now, in the future, if you become more proficient in a language. So those are just some examples of how you can increase your income over time. Hey, and you might create your own course, right? Okay. Now, at this point, some of you may be getting kind of excited about this opportunity. We haven't even gotten to niches yet, but you may be saying, yeah, I think I could do that, maybe. But the fact is that most of you won't do anything, right? You'll watch this video, maybe watch the next video, maybe even watch the third one and learn a little about my course, and then nothing, right? Because doing nothing is, easier than doing something, right? That's human nature. We have inertia to overcome, right? You may also have doubts about your ability to do this. I'll try to assuage those through the presentation, but you may doubt yourself. But here's the thing. You're going to do nothing until one day you're going to wake up and you go, like the guy from Network News, if you're old enough to remember this movie, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore, right? And it could be when you're dealing with your section supervisor at your part-time job, restocking shelves, and he's grousing at you again. Or it could be when you, at the beginning of the month, you sit down to pay bills and realize, well, this month you don't have enough in your account to cover all your bills, right? Something's going to happen. And you may want to revisit this idea of teaching English online. So if you're not ready to pull the trigger today, then what I suggest is that you either bookmark the URL or copy it and send yourself an email. Do something so that you can come back to this later. Yes, doing something costs something, but doing nothing also costs something. I think we forget that too. There are opportunity costs there. If you don't pursue this, then you're not going to have the income for so many months, right, that you would have had. You're not going to have the security and the serenity that you could have had, all right? So quite often doing nothing actually costs more. I think that's a good quote. I don't know this guy, Ben Feldman, but I think he's a smart guy. So that's the end of that section. I'm going to do one more section here one more topic in this video before cutting off. And we're going to talk about the tech stuff, and in with that, how you'll get paid. All right. So the first thing, if you want to teach English online, that you'll need to do is go out and buy yourself a Cray supercomputer. Actually, of course, that's not true. I think people are often surprised. They just sort of assume that they need a really upscale computer to teach English online, and that's simply not the case. Very likely, whatever you already have is going to be sufficient, because you're not going to be doing like video rendering or anything like that that requires a lot of horsepower, right? All you really need is something simple that will support the teleconferencing platforms like Zoom, Google Meet. I'll talk about those in just a minute. And whatever you have is probably sufficient. So it could be a desktop, it could be a laptop like in our picture here, it could be a Chromebook or tablet possibly. I'm not a big fan of cell phones for classes. Cell phones can be a backup when necessary, but I think you need to have a screen that's large enough for two windows. So you can see the student in one and the material for that lesson in the other one. And that might be a PDF or a Word doc, or it might be a website. But you need to have a screen that's large enough where you can see the student and the class material both. And cell phones don't allow that. But again, whatever kind of computer that you currently have, it's probably sufficient. Now, one thing you will need on the computer is a camera. Now, most computers these days do come with a camera. You just open up the lid and it's that little dot, right? That's looking right at you there. But it may be that you do not have a camera. on your current computer, in which case you definitely want to get one like the Logitech here. Logitech is a good brand. I think you can get cameras for somewhere in the $120 range. Shouldn't be more than that. Two things I would say if you do need to buy a camera is that you get one that also has a microphone and speakers built in, like this one, and also be sure that it plugs in via a USB connection. Most do these days, but just be sure you don't get an old one that connects via the 2 points. They were typically pink and green, right? But that's kind of about it. Other than that, as far as hardware goes, I would just encourage you to get a headset like this one here. This would be a good one because it's covers the ears pretty well, but it's a lightweight model. You don't need one of the big heavy-duty gamer ones, right? And I think that's important because if you're going to have like 3 classes in a row, for example, then you don't want anything too big and heavy and bulky. What you want is just something that's going to kind of cover your ears enough to cut out the extraneous noise around you. And I do like a microphone because they cut out extraneous noise. So by using this, most of these will have a directional mic. It cuts out the dog barking or the traffic outside, and your student will hear you better. You'll also hear your student better. I encourage my students to have microphones as well, or headsets as well. They don't always, but I think that it's good for both parties. So that's pretty much it as far as hardware goes. I mean, you might later want to have a printer that scans in case you want to scan some materials to send to your student, but I certainly wouldn't buy one until I have a demonstrated need. And if you have an all-in-one computer, it already has that capability now. If you do decide that you need to buy, a camera or headset, or perhaps it's time to buy a new computer, and this is a good time to go ahead and do it, then save your receipts, okay? And that would also apply if you buy my course or later on you buy some materials, pre-prepared lessons, for classes and so on. Save all those receipts. I'm not a CPA, but I can tell you that in the US and in Canada, I know for sure, probably other countries as well, if you buy materials for the purpose of generating income, those are tax deductible, all right? So save those receipts. All right, so you've got your computer. I didn't talk about the internet, but I assume if you're watching this, you have internet. And if you live in a developed country, your internet is probably going to be good enough for teaching English online. If you ever have like Zoom calls with people, or even you watch streaming like Hulu or Netflix, then your internet's probably going to be good enough, right? Now, what you're going to need then on top of the internet are what I'll call teleconferencing platforms. They go by different names. Back in the day, we used to call these VoIP, right? Voice over Internet Protocol. But they've kind of morphed and grown up, and they have more capabilities these days, and they're a whole lot more stable than they used to be. The granddaddy would be Skype. That's the blue symbol with the white S on the left there. And they've been around for a long time. Some people think that Skype is gone. Skype Business is gone. It was supplanted by Teams. But Skype Personal is still around. I use it. I use it to call mom every week. And you can also use it for classes. I guess and it used to be like the de facto standard. It's been around for a long time. But I guess these days, Zoom is probably the most commonly used teleconferencing software. It really became popular during the pandemic through heavy marketing. It's not actually my favorite for a couple of reasons. I think that in Skype and in Google Meet, which I'll talk about in a moment, it's just easier to launch classes and than it is in Zoom, where you have to schedule classes in advance. And then if you have cancellations or reschedules of class times, it's a little messy. Also, sometime in 2002, Zoom started charging. So if you want to have meetings, that is classes over 40 minutes in duration, you'll need to pay you'll need to have a pay version. It's not really expensive. I think I pay $16 and something US a month for my Zoom package. But if you're starting out and you want to keep your expenses low, why bother? You can use Zoom or you can use Google Meet. I really like Google Meet. I can literally in 10 seconds, you can hop over to Gmail, and you will need a Google account of some sort. You can, if you don't have a Gmail account, you can create one for free. You don't even really have to use it, but you need one. So anyway, to launch a Google Meet class, you would go over to Gmail and change from mail to meeting. You click meeting, create link now, and then it gives you a link. You copy that, and then you can either email it to your student or send it via WhatsApp or some other IM, and that's it. It's done, right? And then you're ready to start your class. Now, whichever one of these platforms you choose, you'll find that they have very similar functionalities, and you don't need very much, right? So you'll need, of course, to know how to launch a class, right? You will need to know how to instant message during the class. So let's say you say a word a couple times and a student's not getting it, and you want to write it for the student so she can see what it is that you're trying to say. You need to be able to IM, and those IMs will also allow you to send links to a website, clickable links. You may want to send a document or a PDF there, so you'll need to know how to do that. That can all be done through the messaging or notes capability. I think you also want to learn how to share a screen. So this is particularly useful if you and your student are going to be working on a website during class. So let's say you're going to be navigating around from page to page. That can get really messy if the student's trying to follow along with you. On the other hand, if you just share your screen, she's automatically going to be with you and seeing the same thing that you see as you navigate around. I think it's the final functionality that would be good to have. I don't use too much, but I use sometimes, is to record classes. And that's really cool. Let's say the student really is focused on improving her accent. You can record some early classes, and then a few months down the path, as she improves, you can also show, if you've recorded those classes, you can show those to her and say, see how much you've improved. Okay, so those are really the functionalities that you need. And again, all of these platforms here will allow you to do that. I think they all support group classes now and other things, but any one of these will give you what you need. They're all pretty intuitive. You can either watch their tutorials, or typically you actually find better tutorials on YouTube for them. And it's really just kind of a matter of learning where the button is. Okay, so enough on that. Now, the important stuff. Show me the money. How are you going to get paid? You live in BC, Canada, and your student lives in Essen, Germany. How do you get paid? Well, the truth is it's easier now than ever. So just as Skype was the granddaddy for teleconferencing programs, PayPal is the granddaddy for international payments. They've been around forever. I still get paid. One or two students pay me via PayPal. It's okay, and there's a very good chance that you already have a PayPal account. If you do, you might ask your student, do you have a PayPal account, or would you mind setting one up? And then it's very easy to do. You should expect to pay about 4% to PayPal to receive funds. It's just a cost of doing business. A sister company to PayPal is Stripe. And Stripe is kind of nice because where PayPal is tied to bank accounts, Stripe allows you to accept payments via credit card without having to set up a merchant account. And if you're familiar with the merchant accounts, this would be like if you had a store that accepts MasterCard, Visa, Amex. Merchant accounts are messy. First off, they're difficult to qualify for. You have to have very good credit, and the fees associated with them are pretty high. Stripe, on the other hand, charges also about 4%, and it's very easy to set up. You don't have to put any money in there. You don't have to show credit report or anything like that. So basically, the way it works is at the beginning of the month, when you want to get paid, you go into Stripe, you create a link which you would send to a student. The student clicks on the link and it opens up like a little dialog box where they enter their credit card information and the security code, and there you go, and you get paid. Stripe will hold the payment for a few days to make sure everything is collected, but then they'll transfer the money within a week automatically to the account that you've linked to your Stripe account. So it's all very nice. So Stripe is a nice alternative. Many students like paying by credit card. You can also do bank-to-bank transfers. I have a couple students that pay me in this way. If they have, now my students are in Brazil right now, one in Portugal, but they can do this kind of transfer if they happen to have an account that's denominated in dollars. They can do transfers. You can also do transfers through Wise. It used to be called TransferWise, and so those are nice. And depending on the particular banks and everything, it's probably free. You as the recipient won't need to pay, and your student may or may not, depending on their particular arrangement. And these days, we have a lot of e-banks and cell phone apps like Revolut. I have one student in Portugal, and she asked if I had Revolut. I said no, but it's she said it's very popular in Europe. So I downloaded it onto my phone, and didn't have to fund it, did not have to deposit any money into the account. And she transfers money into that account every month. And she has a Revolut account, so do I. It's completely free. And even she pays in euros, and it gets converted to dollars, and it's free for both parties. So it's really nice. And there are more and more ways to do international payments all the time. You might even ask your student, how would you like to pay me, and see if you can. You do need to verify that whatever service you plan to use, it will operate in your country, in your student's country. As an example, Venmo is an app that's very popular in the US, but it doesn't work outside of the US. It might work in Canada, but it's basically a North American app, and my students in Brazil could not use it to pay me. And there are apps down there that they use that I can't access. So you need to be sure that whatever platform app that you plan to use, that it does, in fact, operates in both countries. And then after that, you want to check on the fees and try and go with the one that charges the least, right? Okay, so we're going to stop there, but I'm going to pick up in the next video with requirements, the certifications that are necessary to teach, and what's not really required. All right, hope to see you there.